This gets back to what we were saying in the beginning, where 10 years ago, conservatives were all libertarians.
Yeah.
Whereas today...
Guilty, right? I was too.
Well, tell us, what is libertarianism and why shouldn't we subscribe to it as Christians?
So oftentimes you will get arguments about libertarianism and what it is coming from both libertarians and non-libertarians, which are very bad. So one of the most insane, oversimplified, horrible explanations of libertarianism is it is social liberalism and fiscal conservatism. That is so far from an accurate or legitimate description of libertarianism. And it's funny because I started my career out as a political commentator as a staunch libertarian, and I've changed on this.
What was your reasoning at the time? If somebody had asked you to give a quick...
I'm happy to give it in a moment here. And that's why there's this part of me, when I see people define libertarianism improperly, even though I don't believe it anymore, I get offended. There's still this part of me, it's like, no, that's not what it means. What you're saying is wrong. So there are different ways of conceptualizing it, but I think the best possible explanation for what libertarianism is a belief in the non-aggression principle. Now, this is going to cause some libertarian infighting among some people who are going to say, well, no, that's actually not the best way to define it, or I'm libertarian and I don't even believe in the NAP. But what it states is that it is only ever acceptable to use physical force against another person if they have initiated force against you. Mm-hmm. That's true on an individual basis, and it's true at the level of the state. And once you believe that, you end up having to adopt an anarcho-capitalist position because the state can't exist without initiating force against people who haven't initiated it first. So taxation would be an example of this. For the government to take any of your money without your consent is a violation of the non-aggression principle. So they can't do that. We can't have a government that taxes people. You'll have some libertarians who consider themselves minarchists who won't go all the way with it because, again, there are schools of thought in libertarianism outside of the non-aggression principle. That was just what I held to because it's a very clean, clear principle that helps you make sense of a lot of libertarian positions. But there are some minarchist libertarians who will say, you know, the state does have some right to tax people, or even that maybe there could be voluntary methods of taxation, like a lottery that people could play into and choose to give their money to, and that's how the state would fund itself. But overall, it's a belief in minimal state power, and it has nothing to do with one's views on homosexuality or transgenderism per se, or religion. I think what ends up happening is many people who are conservative or consider themselves to be conservative on economic issues, but don't care about transgenderism or homosexual behavior, or even abortion, which is actually very contentious among libertarians. There's no consensus on abortion among libertarians. But these Republicans, who are still very much Republicans, but are kind of socially liberal, will say, oh, I'm a libertarian. No, you don't have this basic principle that tells you state interference is wrong. Right. You just happen to not want the state to interfere with those things. Right. And that's pretty much what conservatives were for a long time. They were called libertarian, but they really weren't, because they didn't have libertarian values with respect to the warfare state. They weren't non-interventionists. They were still fine with the United States getting involved in any and every conflict overseas that it wanted to get involved with, but they also had absolutely no interest in using the government to even attempt to uphold the social fabric. And so we called them libertarian, but they really weren't. They really weren't. And when people say there's this libertarian strain in Republican thought, I understand what they're saying, I do, but it's still not libertarianism properly defined. And maybe that's a little pedantic of me, but that's how I would explain it. And that's also how I would have explained it when I was a libertarian, is that it's a belief in the non-aggression principle.
Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Would you like this beautiful, very high quality, definitely not made in China, not that there's anything wrong with that, Pints with Aquinas beer stein for free, sent to your door? Would you also like a copy of The Jill sent to your door 4 times a year? This is the Pints with Aquinas newspaper, by the way. If you do, go to mattfradd.locals.com and become an annual supporter for any amount. We'll send you that stuff for free, and you get a bunch of other free things in return. You'll get more information by going over to mattfradd.locals.com. Thanks.